We're the book friends that think good.
What does this mean for our life, for our world? Yiggity yeet, my dude. I'm happy to speak. Always happy to think.
I don't know how to do that. I can look into that.
Makes you sound like a book friend that can think good.
It's Jack and it's Weston.
BFTTGs. Yeah.
Jack, I think good. Sometimes I good think, too.
Makes you sound pretty good.
We might want to make it more concise. We are going to attempt to grapple and answer 3 questions. Number 1, what did we learn? Number 2, what did we disagree with? And number 3, what are we going to do about it? I am ready to roll.
I'm in it. Weston, my book friend, tell me, what book is it that we're thinking good about today?
Today, we are talking about Atomic Habits, Chapter 16, How to Stick with Good Habits Every Day.
Opening example of this chapter is a man with 2 jars on his desk. And he had 120 paper clips in one jar and 0 in the other. And every time he made a sales call, he moved that paper clip. And what did he find? He made a lot of sales calls because, you know what? As he started tracking it via paper clips, he knew exactly how much work to do in his day. And it satisfied him enough that he just kept going to fill that jar with paper clips. And he became VP or CEO of something and,
Rule
6
the world.
figures. Right, yeah. Okay. It's a fun example. It's like simple. Like this gets into what we were talking about last time about make it satisfying is subjective.
Yeah, totally.
Like I don't think I could sit at my desk and move paper clips from one place to another and be intrinsically motivated to make sales calls until they were all gone.
No, I would be dreading the hell out of it, dude. I'd be looking at the jar being like, what? I have that many more to do?
Yeah, that would work maybe once for me. I'd look at my desk and be like, okay, wow, that's a lot of sales calls. Now I would do it once and be like, I'm going to remove half of these paper clips.
Yeah. Well, you know what I thought would probably be more satisfying to me personally?
Yeah.
Having 2 spots and moving one paper clip back and forth. Because
That's
more process
yeah.
based rather than like end result based where the next jar is full. Like that would be overwhelming to me. But just like getting to move it to a certain spot back and forth, I could see that being more satisfying to me, particularly.
He does talk about that with a woman who did that with a hairpin, writing a sentence of her book or a page of her book. She moved a hairpin from one place to the other and then moved it back. I think that's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But as a broad overview, this chapter is about how to stick with good habits every day. And clear solution to this is to track your habits. I had a lot of aversions to this. Like when he's like, how do you stick with something every day? You measure it. And my aversions are just like, oh my goodness, here we go. Data-driven tech culture.
Yeah. Like
if you're not measuring something, you're not doing something. How can we know what we're doing if we're not measuring it? Blah, blah, blah. It is a mantra of our day that I think is overplayed. And
yeah.
I think he actually gets into the objections that I came up with in my mind and that I feel and address them all pretty well. I was impressed with the chapter.
Me too, dude.
Ways. Yeah.
Me too. Yeah, I mean, I guess, spoiler alert, this is my favorite chapter of the book so far.
Really? Wow.
By far.
Nice, okay.
By far. All the questions that I've talked about in the previous 15 chapters, where I'm like, maybe he addresses this later in the book. I don't know. I don't know if he will, because he's doing such a job right now. This chapter hopefully is the beginning of the last 5 chapters answering those questions that we've had throughout this book. I felt that he answered a lot of things very significantly and very powerfully in the way that I enjoyed in this book. So first thing for me was on 196.
Okay, yeah, let's get into it.
Where he talks about don't break the chain. Don't break the chain.
Yeah.
Is that your first one too?
Yep. Yeah, don't break the chain is a powerful mantra.
I just thought about like my lifting hobby and I thought don't break the chain is the exact reason why I have never been able to only work out 2 or 3 times a week consistently. Every time I've tried that, I have failed within a month at the longest. I need momentum. I need a chain. I thrive off that. And I know, and it sucks because I know I've seen enough research anyway behind like lifting and stuff. It's like, well, you need to like lift hard and then take a rest day to let your body recuperate and stuff. I'm like, okay, I'm great.
Yeah.
That's great for my muscles. That does not work for my brain. And I have learned to sacrifice. I'm gonna have to sacrifice my muscles for my mental health in that regard, because if I keep the chain going and then still have like active rest days on Sundays, that's when I'm feeling the best. I'm feeling the best mentally. I'm feeling the best, I guess, athletically or whatever. Like rest days do not work for me. They do not work for me. And I don't know if I just have a hard-headed mindset about it, but I want to keep that chain going. So that was a big thing for me. It's like, yeah, I need to keep that chain going. And that's true for a lot of my habits.
Yep. I think benefit number one, he breaks down habit tracking in terms of his laws. And his first benefit is that it's obvious. And I actually really like this principle. I think this is where like it's like much to my chagrin that like data has become so overvalued in our society because it is so valuable. The problem is that it's poorly applied. But I really like what he talks about in terms of benefits one and benefits two, making it attractive and obvious. The first thing he says is habit tracking keeps you honest. Most of us have a distorted view of our own behavior. We think we act better than we do. This is one of the great values of data, is like you have proof that you can look back to and say like, oh, did I do this or not? And I think that is actually a really valuable way to track habits, is to say like, well, did I do the thing or not? You know, like I think about this in terms of spiritual disciplines. Like this is how I developed a habit of prayer. In my early 20s, I struggled a lot with praying because I just like didn't have good practices or habits. Like it hadn't become a habit. It hadn't become an identity factor for me. Like, oh, I am a praying person, or I'm a person who like is resolved to emphasize spiritual relationship with God like daily, you know, like that wasn't something that I thought of at myself being yet. And so I needed to develop habits around that. And I was trying to do things like read the Bible, journal, whatever, and pray and like balance all of these things. And the thing is like, I was trying to do these things, but I wasn't like, I wasn't aware of if I was making progress or not. And I eventually came up with this system, this don't break the chain system of did I pray or not? And I did that for a while. I did it for like a few months of like checking off disciplines like scripture reading, praying, fasting on a weekly basis, and just saying like, did I do it or not? And the thing that stuck from that was prayer very, very strongly. Because I just kind of developed this don't break the chain attitude, and I developed this like honesty attitude where it's like, did I do it or not? And now I take that like check down with myself every day where it's like, did I take an extended period of prayer the day before? I do that in the mornings. And if not, I start the day there. And it's very rare that I don't, because it's just become such a natural identity factor for me. And I've been on that chain for so long. But it started with tracking the habit and saying like, honestly, in 30 days, how much do I pray? Do I do it like, and the first, you know, when I first started tracking these things, I was surprised to see like, oh, I had like 4 or 5 X's in a month, you know, not anywhere near where I wanted to be, even though I was thinking I was doing it more than I was.
Yeah. I agree. I agree with his assessment here that people give themselves too much credit in a lot of these areas.
Yeah. That also goes along with the second benefit, which is it's attractive, that like the most effective form of motivation is progress, and each small win feeds your desire. It's like to see the first time you see a week where it's like, oh, I did this every day. Mm-hmm. That's pretty motivating to keep going.
Yeah, for sure. And what's funny enough is I wanted to bring this up. I'll show it on the screen here, but I've been using a habit tracker with my students and didn't realize it was a habit tracker. like until I read this book. And then I saw his habit tracker. I was like, oh, that's what I have my kids do all the time, every week. So I'll show my version of that I've been using up on the screen for anyone that wants to steal it. I mean, it works for me too. It's not just for 10-year-olds, but it's very simple. Yeah. It's a weekly one rather than the 30-day one. Like, and it's a little bit simpler for sure than James Clear's. James Clear's, when I looked at it, I was like, it's like the same thing, but it's very overwhelming. There's lots of boxes. But I'll show mine. But yeah, and then, okay, so then on 200 to 201, the reason I got so excited is he finally started addressing it, dude. He didn't just say, oh, and then you track your habit, and then everything's good, everything's perfect, and it's a perfect little world. He's like, what happens when you slip? When the chain breaks? What's going to happen?
I made a note there, and I was like, excited. Weston will like this.
Oh, yeah. That's when I was like, all right, dude, I'm in. Finally, yes. Yeah. Now you are being a real person instead of this whatever the hell you are robot. So, yeah. And I really liked his quote on page 201. Yeah. The problem is not slipping up. The problem is thinking if you can't do something perfectly, then you shouldn't do it at all. And I highlighted that, underlined it, because that is one of my greatest struggles, where I always put that in the category of the paralysis by analysis, where I look at something and I will say like, well, crap, I don't have the capacity to do that as well as I know as it should be done or could be done. I just won't even do it. Right? And I've had to learn to just, the phrase that I use a lot with myself is embrace the suck. I don't know if you've ever heard that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, just embrace the suck. And I had a very, very strong perfectionist streak growing up, and I've had to erase that streak to the best of my abilities. It definitely still comes out sometimes. But yeah, like learning to embrace the suck. And the other way that I frame it positively is be brave enough to suck at something new, or applying that to something that you've been doing for a long time is be brave enough to learn something new. So it doesn't have to be a completely new thing, but like shift your perspective on it and learn something new about a different. This is funny. This example gets brought up a lot, and I actually did it, and I don't know why, but. Have you ever been in any like training or seminar or whatever, like talking about these sorts of things? I guess I have because of educators trying to, get kids into better habits and stuff. So I've been in a few trainings along this line. But anyways, there's this idea of, well, you never really think about how you shampoo your head. You've been doing it the same way forever. So sometimes we need to like think about how we do that. And Jack, I've gone through so many different hairstyles. That I actually have thought about how I shampoo my hair a significant amount. And actually a few years ago asked my own mom, because she's a hairdresser, like, what's the best technique to do this? Like when I was already like 23, 24 years old. Yeah. Do I use it now? Not really. But if you can believe it, I had long flowing locks at one point. Yeah. And so I just thought that was a funny example I thought about here is like this example that I've heard multiple times in multiple trainings. Like, oh, you never think about how you shampoo your head or brush your teeth. And it's like, I'm the weird one, I guess. I have done that. But yeah, just learning something new. Because brushing your teeth, too. It's like, I was lucky. That's another funny example, I guess, for myself personally. Like, I never had a cavity growing up. And so, in adulthood, I got my first cavity, like, a few years ago. And immediately, I, like, asked the dentist. I was like, what have I been doing wrong with my brushing technique? How do I fix this? What do I do differently? And like they gave me tips and talked to me about it for like 5 minutes as I'm like a 26-year-old man being like, how do I brush my teeth? Like,
I think you and I, this is something that's maybe a little bit different about our personalities. Like we, I think process failure differently. Like perfectionism comes from a different place. Like I think you approach something like that and you're like, you're like, okay, the technique. Like, how do I perfect this? How do I like make this better? I must improve. Like, I must avoid this mistake again, you know? And for me, like perfectionism is like, we both share a perfectionistic trait in some regards.
Yeah,
For me,
sure.
for you, I think it comes from like a virtue, like a self-challenge. Like, I will rise to this challenge. For me, it's like a stress response that's like, oh, how do I avoid having problems? I just perfect everything around me, you know? Or like, how do I put out fires? Like, make sure there are no fires in the first place, you know? So I hear I have a cavity and I'm like, I need to change everything about my life. I'm going to get rid of my junk food. I'm going to do this. And I have like this thing where
Get home all mad and you're like, honey, we're getting a divorce. What? What?
No,
I got a cavity and you were part of it.
Yeah, no, but I would that's something I might do where I'm like, you need to keep me accountable to this. Like, you need to help me with my junk food, and I'm going to start going to yoga classes, and then and it's like,
going to hot teeth yoga.
Relax. You need to brush your teeth more. You need to stop drinking Mountain Dew. Like, that's it. But yeah, so I fall victim to this a lot. This was a pushback that I had that precedes that idea that you're talking about, which is very good. But the pushback I had is like, habit tracking is satisfying. I was like, I don't think it is. Like, and I had personal pushbacks, and here's like the personal issue for me is like, tracking can become its own form of reward. It feels satisfying when you record another successful instance of your habit. I'm like, that hasn't been my experience. So I wrote all these question marks in the margins, but then he addressed my internal concern, which is like, it's not satisfying in and of itself. What are we talking about here? And he says, it can feel like a burden because it forces you into two habits, the habit you're trying to build and the habit of tracking it. I'm like, that's my problem. We talked before about how I have a tendency to work harder, not smarter. And so I need to like actively work at that. And habit tracking has always been a problem for me in working harder, not smarter, where I do way too much of it. And he makes a point on page 200 that addressed my pushback in a way that I think is really helpful. And I'm really eager to try it, work at it a little bit, which is, he says it's better to consistently track one habit than sporadically track 10.
That was a point that I agreed with wholeheartedly.
Yep.
Where did I put that in my note? But yes, that was one that I highlighted as well. Where I said, do one thing well. Focus on doing one thing well and not doing 10 things half. Like, and I agree with what you said. It becomes a burden, right? So like my goal with the tracking stuff, because like when I first started getting into fitness and all, I was like, okay, I need to track my calories or my protein, whatever it is. Dude, trying to track every meal in a day or every meal in a week is so hard. It's so hard to do it after every single time. And I get that same way where it's just like, dude, I've learned, and what sucks is you need experience to know how to do this for yourself.
You do.
But, I think there is value to tracking, but then learning how to be more efficient with tracking or just tracking what's necessary.
That is
just
such a
tracking
big
what's necessary, limiting what you're tracking.
Yep. That's such an important piece because he talks about measuring the wrong thing.
Yes.
And that I think is such an important point. Like I've caught myself doing this so many times. Like the human mind wants to win whatever game it's playing is the point he makes on 203. And I see that so much. Like this is why I have such a pushback to data and the data-driven culture that we live in and all of that kind of stuff is like, he summarizes it very well. In short, we optimize for what we measure. And he gives the example of like a restaurant. Like you're wondering if your chef is good, so you look at revenue. And it's like, that doesn't necessarily mean that your chef is good because you're selling food. Like the better question is like, well, how will we know if customers are satisfied? Yeah. Like you need to measure the right thing. Like ask your customers, look at reviews. Like are people saying this chef is amazing, this food is great? Or are they just buying more food? You know, that doesn't that could be for all kinds of reasons. Could be because you're quick, quality, you're in the right location, right? Like, and so you start to optimize around those things, and you never really answer your question, like, is my chef good? But this is a trap that I've fallen into a lot in my life, where I start out with good intentions, but then I measure the wrong thing, and I end up in the place I didn't want to be at all.
That's why I had such a strong pushback to the measuring weight, like he mentions early on in the book. And I said, weight, like in my mind, weight is the wrong measure. Weight is not what you should be measuring. You should be tracking, either your diet, I mean both ideally, but you should be tracking at least something with your diet and what workouts you are doing. What exercise are you doing? Don't worry about weight. Weight fluctuates based off, once you get to the upper echelon or whatever, I don't know. Like, weight can still fluctuate 2 to 3 pounds a day based on your salinity levels and the amount of water you drink. So like, it's not a good measurement. It's not a good end goal. You should be focused on, are you getting stronger? Are you getting faster? Are you just doing something? Are you moving? And same thing with your food. Like, at first I was literally tracking like calories, protein, fat, carbs, micronutrients, like everything. And I have discovered that really the only two things that I really need to track, or at least have a good ballpark of where I'm at, are calories and protein. That's it. I don't track anything else anymore. So I only track calories and protein. And for my weight, I kind of haven't really tracked my weight. I still weigh myself, but I don't write it down. And I only weigh myself once a week, but I don't write it down anymore. And I track my workouts, and I don't even track my whole workout. I only track the big lifts.
Yeah.
Like, I know Jack's in a group text with me, so he sees my workouts every day, but like, that's not even my whole workout. I only track, the 2 or 3 main things that I do, not all the accessory other stuff that I'm doing as well. So it's like, I think whittling down what you are tracking to what is actually valuable and important is huge, because it can become overbearing very, very quickly, very, very quickly.
Totally.
I really loved this as an educator when he's talking about this section on page 203. He mentions standardized tests, and I was like, yes,
he does.
Thank you for getting that out there for people, because standardized tests are some of the biggest that have happened in our education system in the last 25 years. And I even mentioned, or I agreed with him. I said his pushbacks to the standardized test: when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. That has been my biggest pushback to standardized tests and SMART goals for students, especially in elementary. Like, when that becomes the target, you have teachers that get called out for not teaching to the test. And so they're called bad teachers, or they're called ineffective, right? Yeah. And when it's like, dude, they might have been doing some amazing things that just didn't translate to one test, to one standardized test. And the other part is teachers that do teach that then get rewarded. Teachers that don't care about the student as a whole and just care about the test score, they then get rewarded with extra opportunities in the field as well. So it's just like, it's a double-edged sword that both edges suck.
Yeah, he talks about this. We teach for standardized tests instead of emphasizing learning, curiosity, and critical thinking. That's where my quote came from. In short, we optimize for what we measure. We choose the wrong measurement, we get the wrong behavior.
Exactly.
This is so true. This is the problem that the church, this is one of the problems of church planting, is like, you have to have metrics. Like, you need to know that you're doing something. But the metrics for a church are so difficult because, like,
I don't even know, like, what are some metrics that you guys use?
Well, here's the thing, like, spiritual growth is what we're after, right? Like, we want deeper people. How do you measure that? You say, like,
stick a fork in them?
Yeah, I mean the traditional, are they done? The traditional thing is to I just, when you said stick a fork in them, I just thought of like a steak. It's like, cut it open. Is it well? Like, how's
I'm
the
just
soul?
imagining some like people coming up for communion,
Yeah.
but it's not communion at your church, and you just stick a fork in them, just stab them, just slightly. All right, blood of Christ.
Yeah.
All right.
What is it in a person will come out of a person. Have you been working on your swearing, Weston? Let me poke you.
Oh no, I'm imagining you as like the pastor, like the expert, right, dude? Just like stabbing someone, a little bit of blood on the fork, and you just lick it for the test. You're like, dude, you need to lay off the swearing. Like,
That sounds like a cartoon, like something you'd see.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay, so yes, like the measurement, like I mean, here's the thing that denominations want to know. How many people are baptized? How many people are at your church service? Doesn't matter. Like that has no bearing on the effect of a ministry. In fact, it could be measuring the wrong thing. Like you could be measuring somebody who's very attractional, charismatic, maybe just like you could reward the used car salesman, right? With that, like, oh yeah, people are coming in because, I'm offering them free stuff, which is what happens in some churches. Like you see that expression out there where it's like, oh, well, we get stuff if we come to this church because like giving money here will lead to blessings in our lives and stuff like that. Like you hear that kind of stuff. But like that works towards the wrong behavior if like your goal is to develop deep people who are moral and like thinking about virtue and concerned with like doing what is right and treating their neighbors well and loving others.
But how are they going to get the instant rewards, dude?
That's the thing is like, how do you make that a rewarding experience? And also like, how do you measure that? Like what are the numbers that you should measure? What are the habits or whatever? And I think that like one of the things we have started to do is not to measure the number of people at our gatherings, but we started to measure like the consistency of those gatherings and the quality or depth. And we do that subjectively, of course, because there's no other way to do it. I was going to
ask, how do you do that?
No, we
just look around, like eavesdrop, and then just be like, 8.
Yeah, no, we just take an honest pulse. We just ask ourselves like, hey, how was that? Like, did that lead to somewhere deeper or not? And like, if it didn't, like, then that's cause for concern. It's like something to optimize, like work towards. But it's been hard. Like metrics have eluded us because we wonder like, I don't know, should we look at like revenue numbers? Like, how do we measure these things? And I think it's sometimes like counterintuitive. Like I worked at a company and I worked in the purchasing department, and our department was one of the most consistent and like some of the top performers in the company. But we had a very simple goal. Our goal was buy stuff. And so like the end of our day was measured by how much stuff we bought. And it was all about like, did you buy enough inventory? Because if you bought enough inventory, you would sell it. You have no other choice. Like as soon as that inventory is in your warehouse, you got to sell it. And that wasn't our job. Our job was to fill the warehouse with stuff. And to be honest, it was very effective method of revenue generation because it ultimately relied on like someone else decided, are we like buying the right stuff and is it priced appropriately? All we were responsible for was actually buying the stuff. And I thought that was a really good, that was a really smart decision to break up the purchasing department in that way, because it measured the right thing. Like, are we increasing our inventory on hand? Because if we are, and somebody else is already responsible for determining is it priced appropriately and is it the right stuff, then as long as we have enough stuff, we should be able to make money. Versus looking at things like how much revenue are you generating as a buyer? Well, that's a very difficult thing to assess, right? Because you're technically not. You're spending money.
Yeah. Yeah. Looking at just the bottom line, like, yeah, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm to my application part, what I want to do with this chapter. What about you?
Yes, sir. I can go there.
So what I want to do, or what I'm going to continue doing, is restructuring my math curriculum for next year.
Nice.
Um, I'm excited because I know it works wonders for kids. I just haven't had the capacity to remake it for sixth grade. I did it for fifth grade and it was amazing, but then I got moved up to sixth and it was kind of a, how do I want to put this? I guess I'll emphasize this. I got moved to sixth grade. Um, and I haven't had the capacity or, to be honest, desire to remake it or to remake a similar structure. Anyway, until now, I know that I'm going to be in, the last 3 years have just been, there's been a lot of uncertainty. So I've been like, I don't want to put a bunch of time and effort into this if I'm not even going to get to use it next year. But I know for sure that I get to use it next year. So I'm like, okay, all right, I will do this now. I'm about 3/5 done, and doing it the way that I'm doing it, structuring it the way that I structure it for kids, allows for more consistent one-on-one feedback with kids and a tighter and more meaningful feedback loop. And I think that ties to your critique of being data-driven, is that there's a lot of times where the data is great, but we can't make meaning of it in a timely manner. Like usually by the time we can assess data, it's dead. It's gone. We can't do anything with it. And so the way that I'm structuring my math curriculum for next year's is all about that tight feedback loop, which, by the way, this is why class sizes need to be smaller. People that think class size doesn't change or affect your ability to teach have never been a teacher and do not understand feedback loops and how you actually get progress. Because if the difference is, if I only have, 18 kids, which would still be a lot, but anyways, 18 kids to give this feedback loop to, I can do that much more effectively than I can with the 30 kids I have now. Like there's not enough time. There's not enough time to get to every kid every day when you have a certain number of kids. So anyways, I'm very excited to continue and finish this math curriculum for next year. I even tested a few with my sixth graders this year and they were like, whoa, this is way better and like way more fun.
Cool.
And they felt like they were learning more from it. So I've kind of been, finally got the capacity and motivation to do it. I've been doing it. I'm about midway and I want to finish that. That's my application, is that, all right, feeling good about it. Let's finish it and get it ready to roll for next year.
Rad. I love that application. I think for me, the thing was, I was really struck by this whole, like, break it down, track less habits, even track them temporarily. That is such a valuable thing. That's so simple to do. It's like, oh, don't track everything in your life. Just track something. Or like fitness, like don't track the calories in every single thing that you eat. Ask yourself, like, did I write down my meals? Like that is so much simpler than saying like, I tracked the, macro balance of everything I ate. Anyway, all that to say, I'm employing a concept that he brings up twice. One is he lists Ben Franklin, who kept a list of virtues, 13 things that he tried to do every day, right? 13 personal virtues. And the first ones that he lists are lose no time, be always employed in something useful, and avoid trifling conversation. And I was like, those are both really good.
Yeah.
Ben Franklin's smart guy. But lose no time was a big one for me to think about, because he makes this point mathematically, and I think it's really interesting that lost days hurt you more than successful days help you. He makes the example of you have $100, a 50% gain will bring you to $150, but you only need a 33% loss to take you back to $100, which is an interesting concept to think about. But basically, if you do nothing at the $150, but then get back on that horse and keep going, like you'll continue to gain. And so I think for me, the big takeaway is Ben Franklin, man. It's lose no time, be employed in something useful. When I think about my church work, like I don't have a lot of control in developing deep relationships with people, but I do have control over, am I building relationships with people? Like, am I moving forward on things? Like, that's something I can easily track. Like, have I reached out? Am I connecting? Am I like building, doing, like losing no time? Am I moving forward? I think as a entrepreneur as well, as a person who has like multiple businesses and projects, be employed in something useful. Like, have no lost days. Fill your day with useful things.
Yeah.
Fill your day with the good things. There's
Yep.
no time for the bad things. Thank you for joining us, book friends. Next week on the BFTTG pod, Jack and Weston, they're thinking good some more with you, our book friends. Check out the show notes or the description, comment section for a link to the book and any articles that we talk about in the show. Bye-bye, book friends.
Bye for this time, guys.
Do a good thing today.
I love you.
Love you too, dude.